And so we come to the end. Um, the English Civil War destroys a good chunk of England. And of course, Charles's execution. You can't help but reflect that none of this had to be, but that the importance of one man, Charles Stuart, brought this on. It would have taken very little to avoid this. Nobody wanted to get here to here. But at some point in here, Charles should have accepted the fact that the king is a political post, and that, well, whether or not you're appointed by God, it's still a political post, and you have to get along with a sufficient number of people to be effective. And he simply couldn't believe that, that you had to think in terms of, what is doable, and not what is the ultimate goal. None of us are making it to heaven tomorrow. You get there step by step. Charles, after much of England had been laid waste, about 1 in 5 Englishmen were killed or wounded in this war. The numbers of women and children who killed or starved to death or just simply got caught in the fighting, hard to estimate, but certainly this appears, although this is not as famous as the U.S. Civil War, the American Civil War, this appears to have been bloodier, more destructive, just a terrible war that was waged all over the kingdom, complete with sieges and just havoc in general. Now remember, Charles, of course, is King of the Scots. Charles Stuart, the Stuarts are Scotch. And Charles surrenders to the Scots, but then, frankly, nobody wants it. And it doesn't take too terribly long for the Scots to turn them over to the British. There's kind of already a loose union between the two of them through the kingship. And, there's not much Charles can do about this. There's a brief second Civil War, which is equally bad. Charles has various escape attempts. He completely does not understand his situation. There was something missing in Charles, and I don't know what it was, but it sure brought ruin to a good deal of the nation. And they put him on trial. Okay, and then, of course, the question is, can a king be tried? They should have asked John back with Magna Carta. A lot of bad things can happen to king, and kings and previous kings have been executed. Edward II was, and Richard II was. It was in private. But now, Parliament, which has been so insistent on due process, is going to give them something like due process. Most of Parliament isn't there. The Lords are not there. And much of the House of Commons isn't there, but they're going to try him anyway. I don't know that many people are terribly sorry to see him go. And when you look at Charles and the abuse of the reign, illegal executions, he bypassed due process, certainly goes back to Magna Carta, quartering of troops, which is a tax without Parliament's permission, the forced loans, which were really taxes, attempts to bypass the representatives of Parliament in every possible fashion, the destruction of much of England. It's hard this many years away, and of course, for most of us in a different country, it's hard to really grasp what the English Civil War did to England, but it's going to take 40 or 50 years to recover from this. And of course, religious intolerance. Charles wanted, and Archbishop Laud, who, by the way, by this time had already been executed. It's hard to really, again, Charles at any point in here could have had a peace just by simply saying, "Oh, okay, you guys are wrong, but we we don't kill people for this, unless you're witches. He didn't do that, and neither did Laud, and both of them end up executed. The charges against Charles. The charge stated that he, for accomplishment of such his designs, and for the protecting of himself and his adherents, in his and their wicked practices, to the same ends hath traitorously. So they're charging the king with being a traitor to the kingdom. That indicates the role that the rule of law and the constitutional rights that descend from the coronation oath of Henry I, Magna Carta, the crowning of Henry IV, all these things, the summoning of Henry VIII, by him, Henry VIII, of Parliament back to ratify what he's doing in terms of religion. The law has now become England, and the king simply the leader of us. Not the wicked designs, wars, and evil practices of him, the said Charles Stuart, have been and are carried on for the advancement and upholding of a personal interest of will, power, and pretended prerogative. That's the king makes a choice on his own, to himself and his family. They're still pretty angry over the French princess, against the public interest, common right. Notice this: liberty, justice, and peace of the people of this nation. The King of England was not a person. It was an office. And that's what the British are saying. And that's what they're going to say. The President of the United States is not a person. It's an office. He, and for all probably fairly soon, she, it's an office which you fill for a limited period of time. And they're saying here, that it is entrusted with a limited power to govern by and according to the laws of the land and not otherwise. Charles responded, which simply indicates he doesn't know what century he's in, but no earthly power can justly call me, who am your king, in question as a delinquent. He's saying, you all don't have a right to try me. God has chosen me. I'm invested with God's rule here. This day's proceeding cannot be warranted by God's laws. For on the contrary, the authority of obedience unto king is clearly warranted and strictly commanded in both the Old and New Testament. For the law of this land, I am no less confident that no learned lawyer will affirm that impeachment can lie against a king. That is, a king can't be impeached. They all going in his name, because impeachments are done in the name of the king. So basically, by impeaching him, though, what Charles doesn't get is they're saying, you're no longer king. And one of their maxims is that the king can do no wrong. Well, he should have consulted John and Henry I, and Edward II and Richard II, because they certainly had been told that they had done wrong, and two of them had been removed and executed. I have no idea what Charles was thinking. The higher house is totally excluded. There were no lords there. And for the House of Commons, it is too well known that the major part of them are detained or deterred from sitting, which happens to be true. Only the radical anti-king folk are there. It's not going to make any difference. He's going to get executed anyway. And it's going to set a precedent. The part of them are detained or deterred from sitting. The arms I took up were only to defend the fundamental laws of this kingdom. That would be the crowning of the king. Against those who have supposed my power hath totally changed the ancient government, which only goes to show that Charles Stuart had no grasp of the history of the kingship, of the kingdom of England. He was king of a kingdom, and other kings had been removed or forced to do things. Go back and read Henry the coronation of Henry I. He says, laws that were made without counsel were not good laws. And so there we have it. And of course, they do execute them. Take them out a window. It was relatively cold that day. It was in January. And Charles, upon dressing, actually slept the night before. Not well, but he slept. He asked his the person who's helping him dress, if he would give him an extra shirt, because he said, I don't want anyone to see me shiver and think that I'm frightened. Okay, I'll give him gutsiness. I appreciate that kind of thing. But certainly, this is, whatever remains of the kingship after this, it's going to be transitional. You're heading some other place by executing the king. You're saying what type of king, by executing the king on the grounds that he violated the laws and the essential constitution of the Kingdom of England, and doing it in public. This is Edward II and Richard II, who were executed in private. By doing it in public, you're making a considerable statement that this is a limited office, just like the presidency of the United States is a limited office. You can't do what you just want to do. You have to do what the laws and the precedents and the Constitution, Bill of Rights, Magna Carta, all that stuff. You have to do what they say. Or by God, you get impeached. In England, I suppose they could still execute a monarch. I don't know. Certainly hasn't been tried as of late, but who knows? There's still plenty of time left in this world, I suspect. So the kingship goes away. He's executed in 1649. His son, Charles II, will take the throne in 1660 because without a central figure in the kingdom who's pretty much accepted as legitimate, there was somebody by the name of Oliver Cromwell in charge of England from 49 to about, he died in 1658. But of course, he is, I think by any reasonable grounds, a usurper. The leadership of the kingdom did not belong to him by right, but by force. And so he died in 1658. His son Thomas has no interest in such a position, which, by the way, would probably end up with Thomas being this much shorter after he chopped his head off. So Charles II comes to the throne, and he's going to rule with considerable discretion, considerable power too. Don't get me wrong. But the kingdom and the kingship is in transition at this point. And I think it would be fair to say that what's going to happen in 1688, stay tuned, is going to be the final dot on the idea of the unlimited kingship. So, okay, everybody out there, stay well, stay lucky, and above all, keep your head.